I had always looked up to my uncle, Richard. He was the kind of man who seemed to have everything figured out. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with a laugh that could fill a room, he was the life of every family gathering. He was successful in his career, well-respected in the community, and always had a kind word for everyone. To me, he was the epitome of what it meant to be a man. It was a hot summer afternoon when I arrived at Uncle Richard's house. My parents had gone on a weekend trip, and I was to spend a few days with him. I had just turned 16 and was looking forward to some quality time with my favorite relative. Little did I know, this visit would change my perception of him forever. Uncle Richard lived in a spacious, old house at the edge of town. It was a beautiful place, with large windows, a wraparound porch, and a garden that seemed to bloom in every season. I had always loved visiting him, partly because of the house's charm and partly because Uncle Richard had a way of making everything fun. As soon as I arrived, he greeted me with a bear hug and a wide grin. "Hey there, champ. Ready for some adventure?" he asked, ruffling my hair. "Always," I replied, smiling back. The first day went by in a blur of activities. We went fishing at the nearby lake, played catch in the backyard, and ended the day with a barbecue. As the sun set, we sat on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. Uncle Richard told me stories about his youth, his travels, and his many escapades. It was one of those rare moments where everything felt perfect. The next morning, I woke up early, eager to start another day of fun. Uncle Richard had gone out to run some errands, leaving me alone in the house. As I wandered around, I noticed a door at the end of the hallway that I had never seen open before. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to take a peek. The room was dimly lit, with heavy curtains drawn over the windows. It seemed to be a storage room of sorts, filled with old furniture, boxes, and various knickknacks. As I looked around, something caught my eye, a small, ornate chest tucked away in the corner. It looked out of place among the other items, almost as if it were trying to hide. I walked over and opened the chest. Inside, I found an assortment of clothing. But these weren't just any clothes. They were women's clothes. Dresses, skirts, blouses, all neatly folded and clearly well cared for. At first, I thought they might belong to a girlfriend or perhaps an old flame. But as I looked closer, I noticed that some of the items were much too large to belong to a typical woman. A sense of confusion washed over me. Why would Uncle Richard have women's clothes in his house? And more importantly, why were they hidden away in this room? As I continued to sift through the chest, I found more items, makeup, wigs, and even a pair of high heels. My mind raced with possibilities, each more baffling than the last. It was then that I heard the front door open and close, followed by Uncle Richard's familiar footsteps. Panicking, I quickly closed the chest and tried to compose myself. But it was too late. Uncle Richard appeared in the doorway, his eyes wide with surprise. "What are you doing in here?" he asked, his voice unusually sharp. I was just exploring," I stammered, feeling my face flush with embarrassment. "I didn't mean to snoop, I swear." For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other. Then, Uncle Richard's expression softened, and he let out a long, weary sigh. "Come on, let's sit down," he said, gesturing towards a couple of old chairs. "I think it's time we had a talk." We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the situation hanging heavily in the air. Finally, Uncle Richard spoke. "I suppose you have a lot of questions," he began, his voice calm but tinged with sadness. "And I owe you some answers." I nodded, unsure of what to say. The man sitting in front of me was so different from the uncle I thought I knew. He seemed vulnerable, almost fragile. "Those clothes," he continued, "they belong to me." I blinked, not sure if I had heard him correctly. "What do you mean?" I asked hesitantly. Uncle Richard took a deep breath. "For as long as I can remember, I've felt different. Growing up, I always felt more comfortable in women's clothing. It's something I've kept hidden for most of my life, out of fear of what others would think." He paused, his eyes searching mine for understanding. "I've always known you looked up to me," he said softly. "And I didn't want to disappoint you. The room was silent except for the distant chirping of birds outside. I struggled to process what I had just heard. My uncle, the man I had always seen as a pillar of strength and masculinity, was telling me that he was different. But why hide it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why not just be yourself? Uncle Richard smiled sadly. It's not that simple, kiddo. Society has certain expectations, and people can be cruel. I've faced a lot of judgment and ridicule in my life. It's easier to hide, to pretend to be someone I'm not. I felt a wave of sympathy wash over me. I couldn't imagine living a life where I had to hide who I truly was. Does anyone else know? I asked. He shook his head. No one in the family. A few close friends know, but that's it. I've always been afraid of what would happen if the truth came out. I looked at my uncle, really looked at him, and saw the pain and fear etched into his face. I realized then that he had been carrying this burden alone for so long. You don't have to hide from me, I said, my voice firm. You're still my uncle, and I still look up to you. Nothing will change that. Uncle Richard's eyes filled with tears, and he reached out to squeeze my hand. Thank you, he whispered. That means more to me than you'll ever know. In the days that followed, we talked a lot. Uncle Richard opened up about his experiences, his struggles, and his fears. I learned about the complexities of gender identity and the challenges faced by those who don't fit into society's narrow definitions of normalcy. One evening, he asked if I would be comfortable seeing him dressed as his true self. I hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. I want to understand, I said. He disappeared into his room and emerged a while later, transformed. He wore a simple dress, his makeup was subtle, and a wig covered his short hair. He looked nervous, almost afraid of my reaction. But to me, he was still Uncle Richard. You look great, I said with a smile. And I meant it. His face lit up with a mixture of relief and gratitude. Thank you, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. You don't know how much this means to me. We spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and even watching a movie together. For the first time, I saw my uncle truly happy, free from the burden of hiding his true self. As the days turned into weeks, our bond grew stronger. Uncle Richard began to open up more, and I learned to appreciate the courage it took for him to live his truth. I also became more aware of the struggles faced by the transgender community and the importance of acceptance and support. One day, as we sat in the garden, Uncle Richard turned to me and said, "You know, I think I'm ready to come out to the rest of the family." I felt a surge of pride. "I'll be right there with you," I promised. Every step of the way. The process wasn't easy. There were tears, difficult conversations, and moments of tension. But through it all, I stood by my uncle, supporting him in any way I could. In time, our family came to accept and love him for who he truly was. Uncle Richard's courage inspired many of us to be more open-minded and compassionate. He became an advocate for the transgender community, using his experience to help others who were struggling with their identity. Looking back, I realized that finding those clothes in Uncle Richard's room was a turning point, not just for him, but for me as well. It taught me the value of acceptance, the importance of being true to oneself, and the strength it takes to live authentically. Uncle Richard once told me that we all have a journey to make, and sometimes the path is difficult and uncertain. But with the support of those we love, we can find the courage to be who we truly are. And in the end, that's what matters most. Thank you so much for watching till now. It means the world to have you here. This community is all about empowering each other and celebrating the incredible journeys of everyone on their path to living authentically. If you're ever feeling lost or alone, remember you have a whole family here for you. Hit that subscribe button. Smash that like button. And let's keep inspiring each other, sending you all the love and strength in the world. Until next time, live your life by your rules.